I'm going to go ahead and start recording.
Okay.
So we'll get started. This is COVID-19 and college planning. I'm Jason Anderson. There's a couple things that I think make me a good candidate to talk about this topic. One is I've been a college planner for, almost 4 years now. I started out at a financial institution here in the Kansas City area, helping families plan and prepare for college. So everything from saving for college to picking a school, picking majors, learning about financial aid. So I've walked many families through the college planning process. The second piece, and I do want to clarify, and I have a disclaimer coming here pretty soon, I teach for a local institution. And so that's another piece that I do have, I guess, kind of some experience from the staff side and the faculty side. So when we start talking about how COVID-19 has changed the college dynamic, those are really the two perspectives that I'm coming from. Let me make sure all my cursors are working here. So I do have a few questions that I want to ask the audience. We did have some technical difficulties as we started off today. So I think we still have some folks that are joining this call as we go along. But typically I do like to know, who's on the call and why they're here, which helps inform what I'm going to talk about as we go forward. But I can tell you just since we're having some folks that are still joining the call as we go along, I can tell you many of the families that I talk to and that I work with when it comes to COVID-19 are really concerned about a number of things. And we're going to touch on a lot of those as we go through the call today. But one of the things that they're concerned about is the traditional college experience just doesn't exist in the era of COVID. They're concerned about safety as well, as we all are, whether you're going to college or not. And then third, really concerned about value. What is the value proposition, which has been a question for quite a long time when it comes to college, whether the value is there. And now whether the value is there when you have to worry about safety, when you have to worry about you're not paying for an experience anymore, because really living on campus is going to be different, going to class is going to be different. All these things are different. So is the value still there, especially for these schools that charge a lot? Now, granted, if you're going to community college, it's about $100 a credit hour. The value proposition is still there simply because it's so cheap. But if we're talking about private schools, if we're talking about larger state schools, is the value still there? All right, so we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Again, this is my disclaimer. I have to do it. So I do teach for the University of Kansas. I'm on faculty there, but my employer has not reviewed this content. It's not the opinions of my employer, so you should know that. And when I'm here doing this presentation, I'm wearing the hat of my role at Grad Metrics, not my hat as a faculty member at KU. So keep that in mind. So how has COVID-19 impacted college? Well, the first thing is that it's a financial impact. So most colleges are expecting a 15% or more drop in student enrollment, which causes all sorts of concerns on the institution side. Funding is going to shrink for state schools. So when we look at state schools in particular, public state schools that have a smaller portion, state schools are not fully subsidized by the state. They haven't been for a very long time, but the subsidy might be 15, 20, 25%. As taxes get affected by COVID-19 and the tax base shrinks because people are unemployed, what have you, there will be funding issues at the state level, both in Missouri and Kansas. So there will be extensive layoffs. We're already seeing this, and I'll show you that a big industry publication, the Chronicle of Higher Education, has a layoff tracker right now. So all across the country, they're looking at people getting laid off, just like they are in other industries. It really is affecting higher ed particularly. And so we're seeing a lot of people getting laid off, furloughed, et cetera. A key to that too, if you're going to college, is your program going to survive? Because many academic institutions are doing academic reviews right now, and they're looking at programs to see which have low enrollments, high enrollments, and that's an issue for some programs that have consistently had low enrollments. They're at threat of being cut right now across the nation. And typically that tends to be liberal arts programs. Unfortunately, the ones like business, engineering, STEM fields that lead to high-paying, lucrative fields and have high demand are not in threat. But when you look at like English departments, philosophy departments, things of that nature, and I have a degree in theology from Rockhurst, so I'm not hammering on those programs, but those are the ones that are at threat of being cut when institutions lose money. And then there's an increase in online and blended offerings. And what I mean by blended, as you probably know from secondary schools, because we're going through the same thing, in order to decrease density on campus for safety reasons and have social distancing, a lot of programs are either being pushed online entirely, or they're a mixture of face-to-face and online, which is called hybrid or blended. And I'm going to provide all these links that I have throughout the slide deck at the end. I'll show you where you can access the PDF and look at all these articles on your own time. But this is that layoff tracker that I was talking about. So you can actually go and see which institutions are laying off and furloughing workers. And so there's a tracker. The link is in this slide deck. That's something that's important. If you're sending your kid off to, let's say, the University of Delaware, it is good for you to know whether they're laying off tons of faculty. Whether they're laying off tons of staff. And I can tell you in particular, what's happening is staff are getting furloughed and laid off. And then after that, typically comes the lower tiered faculty, the lecturer rank is what I would call that. And then after that, as a last resort, institutions will start laying off tenured faculty. But that's only in times of dire financial straits that they can go to that level. So if you see your institution starting to cut into the lecturer ranks or even into the faculty ranks, you can know that they're experiencing some real trouble when it comes to finances. Now, there's still widespread confusion, and I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a few slides. Still widespread confusion, just like in the secondary education space, as to what fall is even going to look like. And many that have even already opened have maybe had one plan and it's been upended and it's become something else. And I'll show you two big examples of that coming up. But there's going to be less staff, less faculty. They're more burdened because they're not only taking on their normal roles, but they're also essentially looking at COVID as well and having to do all the sanitation and all the organization, all the requirements there. So you're also going to have precarious housing arrangements. A lot of times having a double room, which would be traditional, is not going to happen anymore. Reduction in student gatherings, or kind of the traditional college experience is what I would call this. You're going to even see classes held outside in tents, for instance. That's not something you would typically see in a fall semester. There's also a call to suspend things that we've seen for a very long time, like rankings, standardized testing, which this is kind of an opportunity, and I'll get to that here in a second. And then sports. So some big conferences are going ahead with sports, some are not. That has scholarship implications, it has student life implications, all sorts of things there. So for instance, University of Cambridge has already told us no face-to-face until summer 2021. So this isn't just some institutions and not others. These are really prestigious institutions that are saying, we're just not coming back until at least summer of 2021. And honestly, that's probably gonna be contingent on some type of vaccine or contingency measures that will up the safety from the place that it is now. Returning and graduate students are also going to experience some difficulties. They're going to have issues with transferring, forfeiture of scholarships. One thing that's not on here that I've seen recently in recent news is healthcare premiums for a lot of these students are shooting through the roof. I mean, when I'm talking substantial increases in what they're going to have to pay for healthcare, which can be a real barrier of entry. Difficulty for graduates getting jobs, as you might imagine, especially for specific majors. There's some real issues there as the unemployment goes up and the market goes down for job placements. And then decreased educational opportunities across the board. So this is in internships, research opportunities. Actually, if you're in a research field right now, let's say you're doing, or an interactive field of any sort. So let's say dance, all the way through to research like lab operations. Labs are shut down right now for the most part. And so many multi-year research projects have been upended and then sometimes destroyed because of COVID. Because if you can imagine, you were feeding animals in a cage and you had to leave for 2 months, that's going to have substantial implications for your research project. So lots of ambiguity right there in terms of what's going to happen. Now, when it comes to teaching, and again, I'm wearing my grad metrics hat, but I am faculty at KU, and there is the disrupted research. So at the large research institutions, many of these faculty are seeing their research upended entirely. Heavier teaching load for many of these faculty members, greater teaching responsibilities, increased online interactions. And if you're not at an institution, for instance, I used to teach for Park, well known for online operations. But if you're an institution that isn't known for their online presence, more of a face-to-face presence, that is a challenge right now, because faculty that have never taught online are having to flip online in sometimes weeks and months if they're lucky, meaning that there's a real strain there. And honestly, the quality might be lower as well in those instances. So in other words, you're looking at some bad morale. Some faculty are going to be pretty agitated about this. And I love faculty members. Many are carrying the torch, and they're doing way more than what they expected to be doing in the fall. But sometimes faculty can get a bit grumpy because this is not necessarily what they signed up for. So again, you may run into that. Some faculty members across the nation may not be happy about this transition. But the good part of this is there's going to be increased accommodations, understanding, and flexibility. Many faculty members are going above and beyond, and they're offering accommodations that may not happen in other semesters because they understand what their students are going through. So this is the good part of it. You may be able to get accommodations in ways that you wouldn't have before. So what is the future of higher education? Well, many colleges are going to close permanently. And I mean that seriously, and many already have in 2020. Many more are going to experience extensive reductions in footprints, programs, human resources, and a few will maintain business as usual. And I mean a very slim few. These are the schools that probably have larger endowments, that have great cash flow, that have very large allocations of resources for emergency contingencies. And I can tell you that's a very small number of the 4, 5, 6,000 higher ed institutions here in the United States. And I can tell you, historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions are going to struggle pretty extensively because of the type of institution that they are. And so unfortunately, there is an equity piece to this, that there will be some of the schools that have always been high achieving institutions and prestigious institutions will end up in a net gain after this, or at least they're going to be status quo. Many struggling institutions are really going to hit rock bottom during this time. And again, going back to the Chronicle of Higher Education, I've even listed some schools that have already closed or are planning to close in 2020, 2021. This is not a new phenomenon, but COVID has accelerated the closure rate of higher ed institutions. By the way, I'm going to take a look at my clock right now because I only have 40 minutes for this. So it looks like we're 20 minutes in. So if I'm talking quickly, you know why I'm doing that. But I'm sure you'll appreciate a quicker presentation in any case, and get this information quickly and get on with your day. So reopening plans for U.S. colleges. This is published by the New York Times. Again, I'm going to give you all these articles at the end if you want to research this on your own. But this is a general understanding of where fall is going to land for colleges across the United States. So 6% are going to be online only. I'm actually surprised by that. That's a pretty low number that are going to be entirely online. Only 6%. I would assume it would be higher than that. And I can tell you 6% may turn into 25%, 50%, what have you, if COVID continues to rage. And I'll show you, like I said earlier, 2 institutions that made it about 2 weeks face-to-face before they had to flip online because COVID started to resurge on their campuses. 27% are going to be primarily online, 15% hybrid online and person, 2.5% solely in person. So you've got a very, very limited number of colleges that are saying we will only do face-to-face. So that's pretty surprising as well. That's a very low percentage. You would see that be a lot higher if COVID wasn't around. 6% are doing something else entirely. I'm not sure what that means, maybe closing. And then 25% of schools still haven't finalized their plans, which is interesting. Secondary schools are in the same boat. I was listening to the news today, and many of our local institutions here in the metro are still having board meetings deciding what they want to do as they open up in the fall. So some institutions are still deciding, which is a little bit scary. That's a quarter of the institutions in the United States. So the most recent news, what's happening right now when it comes to COVID? Because we're in a really interesting time right now, and that fall has just started. And so we're seeing the plans that colleges have put in place, and we're seeing if they can make it or not, which I guess I shouldn't be laughing about this, but it's really, really interesting to see how long a college can make it before they have to shut down. And hopefully some of these institutions are going to remain face-to-face because they put in good parameters and good safety measures. But some that honestly have had pretty good parameters so far have had to throw in the towel extremely early. And two cases in point there would be the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and Notre Dame. Have essentially made it about 1 or 2 weeks before they said, hey, we can't do this anymore. We're going to flip online. So you can research that. Put UNC in any news search, and you're going to see lots of articles. It's kind of an interesting case study to look at as we started the fall semester. You're going to have competing priorities, and you're already seeing this play out. Fiscal viability and competitive advantage from the staff side. So you're seeing a lot of university presidents, provosts say we have to open because we need to serve our students for one. We need to be fiscally viable for two, because universities on one hand are spending lots of money for COVID, and then they're losing income in terms of housing arrangements and food plans and things like that, sports events. And so many presidents and provosts are saying, hey, we have to open to be viable and serve our students. At the same time, many faculty, students, and staff are saying, we don't want to come back. And so you're seeing this interesting conflicting priorities between staff and faculty, administration, kind of interesting dynamic to see play out. You're also unfortunately seeing a lot of institutions start to shame and blame and punish their students for their response to COVID. Not that there shouldn't be responsibility across the university for safety parameters, but you're seeing kind of this dynamic play out. And you've seen some faculty write op-eds that say, hey, let's not blame students, but that's another interesting one too. Continued staff layoffs, and you're seeing parents start to push for tuition discounts and refunds increasingly because they're saying, hey, this isn't what I'm paying for. My student is online. I paid for a face-to-face experience. Give me a discount. You're seeing some institutions play ball, not a lot. Many are just pushing back and saying, hey, you paid for the quality of the degree or what have you, or this is temporary, and not giving any accommodation at all in terms of payment. All right, so I'm going to flip here. So what are the opportunities? Let's say you have a junior or a senior going off to college, or maybe you have a returning student. What are the advantages and the opportunities of COVID? So again, glass half full, looking at the silver lining, whatever this looks like, there are some benefits to COVID. And so one is selective admissions. So colleges are starting to dip into wait lists because less students are going. And so let's say Harvard University, for instance, 3% to 5% acceptance rate. Harvard's starting to dip more into their wait list, or other institutions. I'm just using them as an example, not specifically, but many institutions are having to dip into wait lists because more students are deferring admission, or they are deciding not to come entirely, or they're deciding, let's say you were going to go to K-State, maybe you're just going to stay home and go to Johnson County Community College, or the same thing on the Missouri side. And so you're seeing more selective institutions essentially be less selective in the era of COVID. If you don't like testing, that's great. Many colleges are dropping ACT and SAT requirements, partially because this has been a trend that we've seen over time, but partially because these tests are getting canceled. And so it's hard to say, take this test when you can't take it. Smaller class sizes. I actually know there are many large lecture halls, because of socially distancing, can only hold, maybe pre-COVID could hold 200 students, and now can only hold 30, 40, 50. And so you're seeing smaller class sizes. You're also seeing increased online and flexible offerings. So that is an opportunity and a benefit as well. More flexibility in the way that you can structure your course schedules, maybe can take more classes or have a more flexible schedule because of the online. And then creating a more affordable pathway. So for those that want to say, hey, I'm not going to go and pay for a selective institution or a big state school or what have you, and they just go home and go to Johnson County Community College or MCC, there's going to be a more affordable pathway that opens up because of COVID. There are some caveats to that, and we can talk about those, but it does open a more affordable pathway. One of the reasons why college is more affordable now in the era of COVID is because of the way what the economy has done. We have historically low student loan interest rates coming from the federal government right now. So undergrad, shockingly, is a 2.75%. I mean, that's crazy. Graduate, 4.3 to 5.3%. Parent Plus loans, 5.3%. These are insanely low, historically low interest rates for student loan rates coming from the federal government. So when you fill out the FAFSA, these are the rates that you're getting. And by the way, the economy also mirrors that. So if you were going to go get a private student loan, you're going to get historically low interest rates as well. So that is a benefit that takes down the overall cost of college. And then there are some other opportunities. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm a college planner, okay? But there are other opportunities for things like HELOCs and mortgages and some of these other ways that people fund college. Of course, there's going to be interest rates tied to those as well. And so there will be some advantages in terms of where interest rates are at right now. It does also give opportunity for refinancing if you have current student loan debt. So when it comes to school selection, COVID has changed the game. So if you're putting together a school list, there are a few things, additional considerations that I would say to make in the era of COVID. One, and probably the most primary consideration that I would say is research the financial viability of your school. I mean, seriously, many schools are cutting programs. So you don't want to be in a situation where you say, hey, I want to go and study nursing at XYZ college. All of a sudden they're cutting a bunch of faculty in that program, or they're cutting the program entirely, or worse yet, the school is closing because they're not financially viable. Many universities are year to year on cash and they have almost no endowment, which is unfortunate, and it means that many of those schools are going to close. So I would say research the financial viability. There's a couple ways you can do that. One is by reading news. One is by checking out industry publications like the Chronicle of Higher Education. The next is reading financial reports, which I know sounds kind of boring, right? But reading those at a place like state institutions publish those. And so you can read that as well. And then you can check some other things like Moody's or what have you, but those would probably be a good place to start. Another thing is college search engines will tell you how big their endowment is. And so endowment, so like Harvard would have a multi-billion-dollar endowment, that will show you that it's pretty financially viable. Because although some of those funds might be restricted, it's something that the colleges could probably tap into in this era if they're seeing big financial issues in terms of COVID. So again, Moody's has told us, and they track higher education and they actually downgraded it to negative in terms of credit rating, I believe. Don't mark me down on that, but I think I saw something that said it's negative. That may not be specifically what it is, but it has been downgraded. But community colleges are still going to remain stable. There's a few reasons for that. One, because they're so cheap. And so when the economy goes down, you see demand go up. And also because, I mean, I'm a property owner, and so you see property taxes. My property taxes aren't going to go away, and so I'm going to continue to pay to Johnson County Community College. People are going to continue to pay to Metropolitan Community College, and so they're going to remain fiscally viable. And then strong online schools will grow. So we've seen a huge uptick in enrollment at a place like Arizona State University, which has hundreds of online degree programs. You're going to continue to see that happen. So look for those things. Other considerations, test optional. This is a boon for many families that either don't want to take the ACT, SAT, or maybe your student isn't a strong test taker. I would ask different questions on your campus visit. Specifically, that's another way you can gather information on whether your college is fiscally viable. Make sure that you're asking about if there's funding cuts to programs that you're interested in. Talk to faculty about what the campus culture is. Schedule time to talk with faculty. Those are things that I would do. Set up a Google News alert for the schools that are on your list and see what news is passing by your desk. That'll give you a good idea whether that school's in trouble, if they have layoffs. Plan ahead on internships. And I just got a 10-minute warning, so I think we're about done. But yeah, plan ahead on internships because it's a difficult job market. And hopefully in 4 years, it won't look like this, but you do want to plan ahead. So make sure you're talking with your career services professionals. And then make sure, especially for high achieving students, so high GPA, high ACT, SAT scores, high class rank, you still need to do the research on faculty to understand those class requirements. Because there may be some decreased opportunities to do research, to go on study abroad, to do some of these things that you would otherwise do, especially and even in scholarship requirements, there's going to be some funding cuts. And so you do need to do your research as well, even if you're a high achieving student and expecting scholarships or admission to some of these higher tier schools. So, hey, I made it before I got cut off. This was really good. I know we probably lost a lot of folks that were going to come here because we had to do this last minute Zoom link. But that's why I wanted to record this presentation, and I am going to make it available both, I'm sure, on my website, and then I'm sure Metropolitan will upload it to YouTube or post it on Facebook or whatever that looks like. But always, if you have questions about anything, never hesitate to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. Again, I'm wearing my Grad Metrics hat, so I've put that contact information here, my cell phone, my email. Always feel free to reach out. And I always, on all these, I do workshops at Johnson County Community College, Kansas City Public Library, high schools, Metropolitan Public Library. And so many places I'm doing workshops, and I always have people ask for a PDF of the presentation. I'm more than happy to do that. And I post all those at gradmetrics.com/workshops. And so if you want a PDF of the presentation, go there, you can download it, no problem there as well. So it's been good being here with you. Again, reach out if you have any questions. Happy to help. Thanks for being here.